Hey, what's going on guys? In this video, I was lucky enough to shoot some Kodak Vision3, which is motion picture film on my medium format photography cameras. But before we get started, I'd like to say a huge thank you to my friend Yang over at B2Scan for providing me with this film and for taking care of the developing and processing. B2Scan are a Melbourne-based business offering flex-tight scanning services, and they're also about to venture out into the darkroom world. They're also about to start selling these film stocks, which are pretty rare, at least in Australia, so make sure you stay tuned to their website and social media for all the latest information. I will have all the links listed down in the description below, so make sure you check them out. So what is Kodak Vision3? Well, as I said, it's motion picture film that uses a different development process than C41, which can be used in cinema cameras. If you pick any Christopher Nolan or Quinten Tarantino film, for example, a lot of them are shot on these types of film stocks, so it is pretty interesting to be able to use it in a photography format. So the film I shot had been repackaged using old backing papers, and then it's trimmed down to 61mm to be able to fit in a medium format camera, allowing me 10 photos per roll. The photos are then developed using ECN2 chemicals, giving it a much different look to most of the other film stocks out there. Now normally this isn't super accessible in a photography format, as it does require a more hands-on production and different development chemicals, so you will struggle to find it commercially, and most labs probably won't process it. The only other film I can compare it to is CineStill, however that still uses the C41 development, so the process is slightly different. I personally have never shot CineStill, but from what I've seen, the overall aesthetic is somewhat similar because they are both motion picture films, but with CineStill, the remjet layer is removed, allowing it to be used in normal development. So Vision3 also does come in a 35mm format, which is probably more traditional and commonly used, but I was using the 61mm or medium format version. So I shot two rolls of Kodak Vision3, one being the 250D, which is a daylight balance film, and one being the 500T, which is a tungsten balance film. So starting with a roll of 250D, which I shot on my Mamiya RZ67, I hadn't actually used this camera in a number of months now, so it was really nice being able to use that camera again, and I've realized just how much I love using it. So I decided to go to a few spots where I knew there were some older cars lying around and some really interesting scenes nearby. So I went out in the middle of the day when the sun was super bright to test out the dynamic range of this daylight balance film. And to be honest, I'm so impressed with just how well it retained the highlights. I was using a light meter, but I didn't use it too seriously, so I was a little concerned that these photos would be well overexposed, but thankfully a lot of the detail is still there. This film also apparently has 15 stops of dynamic range, so it's pretty similar to Portra in that regard, making it a very versatile film. So as you can see, these first few frames were of some older cars, and what really drew me in was the colours and overall location that they were parked in. I was going for these 3/4 angles, which ended up contrasting really nicely with the blue sky, creating a strong amount of vibrance in the photos. One thing you may have noticed about this film is the light leaks on the perforations, which I really do enjoy. I'm not sure whether this is due to the film itself or maybe a camera issue, but either way, I feel that really adds to the image, especially when there are some warmer elements in the photo. This might not be for some people, but personally I really like it. I've always been a fan of light leaks and artifacts in my photos, as these things happen when you're shooting film sometimes, so it's better off just to embrace it. So I then continued walking around the streets, keeping an eye out for anything of interest, and came across this vantage point of the city, which came out much better than I expected. I was using a 90mm lens on the RZ, so I was a little concerned that the background would be too small, but in terms of perspective, I think it works okay. This film once again handled the highlights incredibly well, and it seems there is no loss of detail anywhere in the image. The next two frames in this roll weren't too far from the original spot, so I drove around the corner and took a few photos of this creek running alongside the freeway. This is a shot I've been wanting to make for years now, so I finally decided it was the right time to do so. The lighting probably was a little bit too harsh, so it might have been better to shoot earlier or later on in the day, but I think it came out alright. And the last photo I took on this roll was just of my dog at home, just to test how it would look as a portrait image. So that is the first roll done, and I'm super impressed with this daylight balance film stock. I can definitely see myself using it more and more due to its sharpness, retention of highlights, and overall cinematic feel. Now onto the next roll, which is 500T, shot on my Mamiya 7. It is interesting comparing just how a high ISO film stock with a different white balance looks, and it does have a major impact on the image, which to be honest I wasn't really expecting. So for these photos I went for a walk around a local park near my house around sunset, and unfortunately it wasn't the best sunset, but I still think the images came out decent enough. I was treating this as a test roll, so I was experimenting with my compositions, which was nice, just making images without thinking too hard about them. So being a tungsten balanced film, there was definitely a stronger blur cast than the 250D, which is more what I expected this film stock to look like. It definitely looks a lot more motion picture like, rather than a photo shot on portrait for example, which is the whole reason why someone might shoot this film. I think it also does a really good job of capturing the strong green tones of the grass and shrubbery, while also not oversaturating the sky. In saying that, it managed to get that golden hour glow, especially in this image where it appears just behind the tree. There were some other photos from this roll, but I decided not to include them as the focus was off on some of them and the overall compositions weren't too great, but hopefully this handful of images will give you a better idea of how this film handles in this particular light setting. So all the photos that I've shown throughout this video were scanned on the Flex Tight scanner, and I made no further adjustments in post-production apart from a few dust cleanups in Lightroom. Like a lot of people, I get so sick of shooting portrait, so it was quite freeing being able to shoot something a little different, and I had no expectation of how it would turn out. So that was the 250D and 500T rolls of Kodak Vision3, and I hope you can kind of see the differences between the two. In my personal opinion, I think I prefer the colors on the 250D roll, but that could be due to the compositions and overall lighting, which makes for a better image. But then again, I still think the 500T did an amazing job. I definitely plan on shooting loads more of this film in the future, hopefully at some cool locations as well. It would be cool to plan to shoot somewhat Gregory Crewdson style, and to also test the portrait capabilities of both of these films. So keep an eye out for those videos coming sometime in the next few months or so. Once again, thank you to B2Scan for allowing me to shoot these rolls, and make sure you check out their links below to get a better idea of their services. So hope you did enjoy the photos and the video too, and if so, then please consider subscribing. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.